Protests popped up in Jordan and in Gaza. Palestinian leaders condemn the action, calling it a path to destruction.
What is the American administration doing? They are preempting, prejudging issues reserved for permanent status. They are undermining the moderate forces in Palestine and Israel. Those elements who want to achieve peace peacefully based on a two-state solution are being destroyed.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu applauded the decision.
The United States has made a very important thing, stopping the funds for the agency perpetuating refugees, called UNRWA. The U.S. is finally beginning to solve the problem.
It's historic. I think it's very brave. I think that for the first time in decades, we are really touching the core issues, and therefore I'm very hopeful.
One core issue involves the right of return, which goes back to 1949. It's the idea that the original Palestinian refugees and their descendants should be allowed to return to Israel. That number now totals about 5 million.
I think President Trump is touching on the core issue. The issue is not how large Israel will be or how much territory it will cede, but the question is if Israel will stay. Israel obviously wants to stay, but the Palestinians, unfortunately, do not accept us yet.
Author Adi Schwartz says the right of return means the end of Israel.
The right of return means that an infinite number of Palestinians could legally and by agreement enter and resettle the state of Israel. So obviously the real meaning of the right of return is to undo the state of Israel, to kill the state of Israel and to make it into an Arab state.
U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, agrees.
But 5 million Arab Muslims who can say they're not coming down. Get the right of return off the table. It's not to be negotiated. It's not going to happen. Once it's accepted, it's not going to happen. Then you say, okay, how do we come to terms so we have a two-state solution? Do you agree with that? The right of return?
I do agree with that, and I think we have to look at this in terms of what's happening in Syria, what's happening in Venezuela, what's happening in other parts of the world, and how we treat refugees and how we're going to look at that going in the future. So I absolutely think we have to look at right of return.
In my view, that this is the first time for decades that the American administration is saying the truth.
In the meantime, millions of Palestinians languish in limbo.
You have this UNRWA agency, which is giving them refugee camps, and they're giving them housing and healthcare and education. They have no incentive to create their own lives. This is a very bad message to peace and, of course, to their lives as well. I think Palestinians cannot go on with their lives as long as UNRWA stays.
And Chris Mitchell joins us now from Jerusalem. So, Chris, give us a brief history of UNRWA and why it matters.
Okay, Ephraim, here's your history lesson in about 60 seconds. 1947, the UN divides the land between Arabs and Jews. The Jews say yes, the Arabs say no. 1948, Israel declares itself a nation, and then 5 Arab nations attack Israel with the design to get them, drive them into the sea. During the war, many of the Arab nations tell Palestinians living in the land to leave, and then in about 2 weeks after the war is over, they've driven the Jews into the sea. They'll be able to come back to their homes. 7 years later, many of those Palestinians are still waiting to go back. What's happened to many of those refugees, some say between 400,000 and 800,000 refugees, they went to other nations like Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, the Gaza Strip, and the West Bank. But they haven't been absorbed, and that's unlike any other refugees really in the 20th century. And so that's what makes these Palestinian issue so unique, UNRWA so unique, because these are the camps that they've been living in for more than 70 years.
Do you see a major change in how the Trump administration is dealing with the Israeli-Palestinian issue?
A huge change. This is one of the issues. The Palestinian right of return has been a non-starter for Israelis. Can you imagine 5 million Palestinian refugees coming into Israel that has about 6 to 7 million Jews? So that's something they can never accept. So the Trump administration taking that off the table, as well as Jerusalem off the table, is something that really is a sea change in Palestinian-Israeli conflict and the U.S. role. As you heard Adi Schwartz say in that piece, for the first time in nearly 25 years, a U.S. administration is finally telling the truth about the situation.
Real quick, Chris, what do you think this pulling of funding from UNRWA will mean for the agency?
For the agency, it seems, I think that many times it's going to be other nations will come in. No one's talking about taking away humanitarian aid in the sense that these people really do need help. They need food, they need clothing, they need these refugee camps. But it's the political nature of these refugees, the idea that they could have a right to come back to this land. And that's why many people see the refugees as almost being weaponized by the Arab nations, by the Palestinian Authority, and the weapon is designed going straight at Israel.
Our Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell reporting from Jerusalem today. Chris, thank you.